Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. The Flamingo flight season has now been officially opened as Ukrainians are demonstrating the videos of supposedly some of the first launches of Flamingo missiles, and there are even bad quality images that are showing that the impact of Flamingo missiles is quite significant. We're going to take a look at that. Beyond that, we saw a fantasy galore with Russian command chief Gerasimov presenting to Putin and the command staff his variant of the front line in Ukraine. It's a thing to behold for sure. But there's a lot of other news and more in today's daily Ukraine news update. We're gonna start by repeating what I said last week, and just to underscore it one more time, is that Crimea has turned into absolute slaughterhouse for the Russians, and it's not getting better. Over the weekend, we saw Ukrainian intelligence post how they are destroying helicopters. At least 2 helicopters were heavily damaged or destroyed in the Crimean Peninsula. Beyond that, there was additional reports that many of the radar installations have been taken out in the peninsula. It is bleeding money, and it's going to continue bleeding money, and it's going to become worse and worse and worse. But obviously, everyone wants to see and know how the Flamingo missiles are performing. Ukrainian side has released a video of supposedly 3 of the Flamingo missiles being launched against the targets in Crimea. And these missiles are pretty good. They're supposed to be all Ukrainian development, maybe with additional help and expertise provided by their allies from Europe and maybe the US. And more importantly, they are fully produced in-house in Ukraine. And these are long-range missiles. We're talking 3,000 kilometers with a pretty big payload. And we've seen some of the first uses of Flamingo missiles against a small base in Crimea. There was a destruction done together with a drone campaign that was ongoing at the same time. But one of the things that was noted by the satellite images that for now are in pretty bad quality because we're early satellites, but hopefully we can get something better. But as you can see right in the middle there, this section of the house, this L-shaped house at the bottom of this square that you see just above, that is exactly what we see on the video over here. And then you can see that it seems that after the impact, that house was pretty much torn into pieces, which is pretty impressive given that this is like a whole facility. And if it was indeed struck by a Flamingo missile and it just collapses and takes out the whole building, that is truly fantastic. And that means that once these Flamingo missiles are produced at scale and start attacking more and more targets, then we might see really truly devastating effects. Some people questioned why was specifically this target chosen, and the answer to that is, well, why would anyone told you that? Now, a lot of people start speculating that it's some kind of low priority target, but we've seen how Ukraine operates. There are reasons why they're choosing some things instead of others. Most likely because they're taking out stuff in Crimea, that this was a stepping stone to allow, for example, Ukrainian naval drones or FPV drones to potentially fly into Crimea and prevent shooting them down, which potentially led to us seeing a lot of these strikes on helicopters or radar installation. And all of these things could be very easily interlinked, or there might be additional video coming very soon where we see even more damage being done to Crimea. That's why before you start doubting Ukraine and their choice of targets, don't push the horses. And now we need to delve into the comedy segment of today's newscast, which is the Gerasimov's presentation on the front lines in Ukraine. We oftentimes discuss whether or not Russians understand the situation on the front line or they're just deluded. And I always try to explain that they are deluded. But in a surprising moment of clarity, they showed for everyone to see just how far from reality are there. And let's dive into this nut house altogether. So there was a presentation to Russian command staff of the situation on Ukraine, and like there were said a lot. They said many incredible things. They said that like half of Ukrainian towns are already encircled and they're about to fall. They were talking about the possibilities of how Ukrainians are about to collapse in the coming weeks, that they are so good and they have no issues in the military. This has caused a major uproar in the pro-Russian Z Patriot Society, where Russian Z Patriot propagandists were just crying and stating, who was that person that submitted untrue statements to Gerasimov? Even the Z Patriot channels that are every week displaying and talking that, you know, Russians are winning, that Ukrainians will collapse, that Ukraine is like a non-country and it's only like mobilizing forcibly only the cripples and children or whatever. Even these guys came out with statements as like, listen, this is a bit too much. Let's maybe not go that way too much. And obviously the first thing is the map, and it's hard to overlay here. I don't have the graphic skills, so maybe at some point I will show you, but you can take a picture of this map and maybe try to compare to the deep state map, but it is crazy. So for example, we know recently there was situation at Kupiansk where Russians a little bit moved kind of at the north here. Well, on this map right over here where Kupiansk is, that is already supposedly almost encircled from almost both sides. And the Russians, as I said, they were talking that Kupiansk is about to be basically captured and half of city is liberated. And I think there was a little bit help from the deep state not from deep state, but the conflict intelligence team analysts that actually overlaid some of the map. So this is the real map. This is the deep state map of the Pokrovsk salient. This is where Russians advanced. Remember this? And then they were cut off. And now the situation is pretty tough for Russians there. We all remember that. We followed this very closely. And then this is the Russian map. So you can instantly, where it's like, what? This is a lot more than anyone reported. And without even talking about the fact that you see here that Pokrovsk is already like semi-encircled from the north completely and totally. But more importantly, when you overlay this, so you see in the like a light red here, that's the outskirts where Russians are reporting. They're like over, because Russians are advancing very slow. So for them to get this one, it's additional maybe at least 3, 4, maybe actually at some directions, probably even more than half a year of additional efforts that they need to do to achieve this, without even talking about the fact that there is some things here that they are captured from the Russians. And it is hilarious. So yeah, the fantasy galore with this map never stopped, and especially when you overlay it with the things and a fantasy world that Gerasimov has been telling about Ukrainians losing on all fronts. The long story short, it seems to be that they're automatically coloring that they are in control of certain settlements wherever any kind of like one-person unit or like drone is able to drop some kind of flag or something, some kind of proof, despite the fact that it has nothing to do with reality. Especially, for example, inside of city of Pokrovsk, there was only couple the groups that were in the city that was later destroyed, and Russians right now are not present in Pokrovsk. But it was not the only map actually shown at this comedy galore. There was the second map. And the second map was in the left corner of this image, right over here, because you might not recognize it, but this is the map. This is actually the map of Ukraine and Russia. And people analyzed it and noted, wait a second, I think the country borders on this map are not completely right. And basically in this map, they already carved up the territory of Ukraine. And here the Russian news agency is actually colored in red what was already supposedly part of Russia. As you can see, not only the 4 eastern areas that in full, by the way, not what Russia controls currently, but in full have been already attached to Russia, plus Crimea, but also they attached Odessa region and Mykolaiv region all the way up to the Moldova and towards the region. That is the fantasy map number 2 that they had in the cabinet of Gerasimov. So Russia is not going to stop with their imperial ambitions. They are very far away from accurately assessing how well or not well they're doing on the front line. And we're actually going to cover in the coming days how did they perform during the summer offensive, and we'll try to remind them what they promised to achieve and how little they actually achieved. And I want to stop here for a second just to admire the Ukrainian Mirage 2000. I think it's a beauty. Don't you think it's a beauty? It is a beauty. If you like it, click subscribe button if you haven't so far. Shameless plugin. Let's continue. Partisans in Russia are active. So when we're talking about what Russian opposition look like, for me, this is the Russian opposition, the one that is burning the cabinets and sabotaging railways in Russia. I am eternally grateful to them for the bravery and what they're doing. I wish more Russians would do that. So the people asking for the resistance activities and what are they doing, I decided that from time to time we'll be picking up some of these news so you see them as well. France and Germany agreed to provide Ukraine with additional air defense systems in response to the recent Russian attacks against Ukrainian cities, including the attack on Kyiv on the 28th of August, the attack that killed over 20 people in Ukraine, including 2 children, youngest one being a 2-year-old girl. According to the report, French President Emmanuel Macron hosted a German Chancellor Friedrich Merz in Toulon, France. The leaders held a Franco-German Defense Security Council, after which they issued a joint statement. Quote, "Despite intensive international diplomatic efforts, Russia shows no intention to end this war of aggression against Ukraine," they've stated. Therefore, more help will be coming to Ukraine. Thank you so much, Europe. Thank you so much, France. Thank you so much, Germany, government and people. Finland and Poland seek to boost up Mother Nature in order to fight the potential future Russian invasion. They want to recreate long-lost boggy floodplains in strategic areas to create an impossible swamps for any kind of mechanized Russian attacks, creating a natural layer of defenses against any kind of possible push from the Russians, making movements of Russians more predictable and ability to create bottlenecks for any kind of advancing force. The strikes on Russian oil refining facilities continue and are actually considerably picking up tempo and dealing some actual damage. Kuibyshev refinery that was struck last week reports that they have halted the operations. Oil processing at Russia Kuibyshev refinery has been suspended since August 28 after Ukrainian drone attack damaging key equipment, Reuters reported, citing 2 industry sources. Additionally, over the weekend, Ukrainian drones struck oil refineries in Russia's Krasnodar and Samara regions. Ukrainian drones struck oil refineries in Russia's Krasnodar Krai and Samara Oblast overnight on August 30th. The commander of Ukrainian Unmanned System Forces, Robert Madyar Brody, confirmed. The targets were struck very, very loudly. Locals have reported significant damages. And from the experts' knowledge, it seems that exactly the targets that needs to be struck were indeed struck. Effects of these strikes in tandem with the sanctions are causing massive damages to the Russian oil companies, as they are reporting significant decrease of their profit base. Rosneft, which extracts half of Russia's oil, reported fall in profits from 773 billion rubles, which is about 9.7 billion US dollars, to 245 billion rubles, about $2 billion only, the Moscow Times notes. Lukoil lost half of its profits, earning 287 billion rubles, about 3.6 billions, compared to 590 billion rubles, 7.4 billions a year earlier. Gazprom Neft profits shrunk by 54% to 150 billion rubles. This is only 1.8 billion. Tatneft almost triple decline, left at 54.2 billion rubles, about only $680 million. And Rusneft's profits dropped 3.2 times to 11.8 billion rubles, which is 148 million. Surgutneftegaz even turned out a loss, posting minus 452.7 billion rubles. So a loss of $5.6 billion over the 6 months. In general, the oil and gas industry, which accounts for every fourth ruble in the budget and almost 20% of national GDP of Russia, lost 50.4% of its aggregate profits. Recently, there was actually even more statistics coming from Russia, and all of them are stating one thing and one thing only. Russia is doing terribly. And now it's not me, a French guy on YouTube, saying it. This is the statistics, the numbers talking. You cannot hide behind bullshit at all times. And this is going to get worse and worse and worse. All thanks to this guy right here, Robert Brovdi Madyar, the commander of the Ukrainian unmanned system forces. After Orban banned him the entry to Hungary and supposedly to Schengen area altogether, Hungarian opposition politician actually spoke up against it. And more importantly, Martin Thompson, the politician in question, has donated money to the Ukrainian army in support of the ethnic Hungarian commander responsible for the latest strikes on the Druzhba oil pipeline. Quote, "The government is not the same as the country. Therefore, I ask you to join me in providing that is not Ukrainians, but the Hungarian government that poses a threat to Hungary's energy security, and that we understand why Robert Brovdi is the hero in Ukraine." In defiance of Trump's deadline for negotiations between Putin and Zelenskyy, Putin instead went to China to spout nonsense about the Western world, actually trying to suppress the unfortunate Russia, and basically spit again into the Trump's face by stating that they should ally with China and create the more concrete axis of evil. But more importantly and more terrifyingly for Russia, the facade here unfortunately doesn't stand to scrutiny that much. Firstly, despite all of the things being said and about China and Russia and how they are great partners forever, the trade between Russia and China has been actually slipping. Russia is struggling to maintain a trade balance with China that is favorable to them, and it is causing big issue for the Russians. And beyond that, while there is talks about the improvement, increased supply of gas by the Russian pipeline to China by some 6 billion cubic meters per year, it unfortunately comes with some major bad news for Russia as well. For example, China completely rejected building a second pipeline that would connect Russia and China. And more importantly and more terrifyingly for Russia is this news, is that Chinese oil companies have discovered major shale gas reserves inside of China proper itself. Estimating to be around 165 billion cubic meters, and there are prospects to actually discover even more. So China is becoming a gas powerhouse in its own right. So Russia expecting that they will suddenly increase the sales of natural gas to China, in my perspective, is a pipe dream, if you know what I mean. Thank you so much for watching this video. There was actually a lot more news, and I will start putting them into the coming videos as well. We will also cover the outcome of the Russian offensive campaign in the summer in the coming days, and obviously we'll talk about the state of the Russian economy and new statistics data. Stay tuned for the channel. I love you. Slava Ukraini, and I will see you tomorrow.